Hello, everyone. This is the 261st episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I welcome back Belgian football fans, Mr. Jean-Marc Richard and Mr. Stéphane Lievens, as we discuss the Belgium national team during the 1982 World Cup qualifiers. Welcome back to both of you.
Hi, Sean.
Hello there.
So last time we left off at the end of the 1980 Euros, where Belgium surprisingly finished runners up in the 1980 Euros in Italy. So, what was the status of Belgian football in the fall of 1980 after this surprising runner up finish in the 1980 Euros?
I think there was a lot of optimism back then, if I remember well.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
remember that?
Well, after the second place, it was clear that Belgium should qualify for the World Cup. It was the objective of
Yeah.
Thijs when he arrived. And the second place at Euro was a little the cherry on the cake and was not really expected. But after that good tournament, everyone expected them to go to Spain, especially as the number of teams increased from 16 to 24. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
means a few more European teams could qualify.
If I remember well, back then, after the Euro, the mindset changed completely. We became a bit more optimistic about our chances. And yes, despite a very difficult group, we were fully expecting to qualify.
And also the supporters or the fans was more important. I mean, in Italy, there were only a few hundred supporters. But for the games against Netherlands and France in Asia and even against Ireland, the stadium was full. It was about
Yeah.
60,000.
Yeah, yeah. I went to all the games back then for the qualification at home. I mean, not away, of course. And I remember Netherlands and France. It was really, really packed. It was behind the goal. It was really full. And as a side note, I like to say that the ISIL disaster would happen 4 years after, and in my mind, I remembered it was dangerous back then, still behind the goal, because there were too many people inside and very few exits. But as a side note, of course, it's not about the qualification.
No, but I was against France also against behind one goal. And I had the same feeling
Yes.
after the second goal from Van den Berg. The crowd was pushing and it was frightening. In fact, I was only 14 at the time, and you were
Yes.
probably 15, something like that. So
Yes.
for us, we were young adults. We were not adults, we were teenagers. And well, it was a little frightening. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, what happens in 85 was not really a surprise when you consider the state of the stadium.
Yeah, it was a combination of different factors, but that was one of the factors from the ISIL disaster. Yeah, that was, like you say, quite frightening as a young lad. Yeah. But that's not about the qualification, of course, but I wanted to say that.
Well, Gitis had in a number of years rebuilt the Belgian national team with the offside trap as its most efficient weapon. Was he already regarded as one of Belgium's top managers in history at this point, despite just being in the job for a number of years?
Yes, he was highly regarded, if I remember well. So we had full confidence that he could lead us to the World Cup.
As we discussed in the previous podcast, he has also the support because he was a real Belgian, speaking both languages, and a real people manager, quite enjoyable, discussing with the press and with everybody. So he was a quite enjoyable personality.
Yeah, always with his big cigar, if I
Yeah,
remember.
and the whiskey when they won.
Yeah.
And let's remind everyone that TC's main tactics were a 4-4-2, again, revolved around this offside trap. You have the eccentric goalkeeper Jean-Marc Pfaff in goal, and the likes of Eric Gerets, Walter Muse, and Michel Renkin in defense, Rene van der Eycken, Ludo Cook in midfield, and of course Jan Sulemans and Erwin Vandenberg, the new Soulier d'Or in Belgium. It was a top side, and this was the generation that would see Belgium through into this decade. This was a very difficult group. So, do you think, given their new status, they were looked upon as favorites to qualify from this group for the World Cup?
I think
Yes.
in Belgian opinion, yes, they were supposed to qualify, especially as there were two qualifiers in this group, two teams qualified in this group. We knew that Holland was no longer as good as they were in the 70s. France was a rising team with very good players, but in fact, against France, we have generally a good track record at the time.
At the
It has
time.
changed since that. It has
Yeah.
changed since that. Ireland, well, it's always difficult because all the players of Ireland were playing in England and were quite good. So everybody expect a three horses race between Belgium, France, and Netherlands. And after the first game, I think we realized it would be a four horses race as Ireland defeated Netherlands in Dublin. But yeah, we were quite confident that we should go through.
Yeah, Ireland were not expected to be in the running after the start, but they started very well, I think, if I remember well. It was a reel of between four teams, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ireland, they had very good players at the time. They had
Yes.
Liam Brady, which Juventus took as the only foreigner they were allowed to. So it means something when you take someone from Ireland in your team when you are Juventus. It means this guy was very good at players of Arsenal, Manchester United, like Stapleton and so on.
Yeah.
So difficult team to play in Dublin and always with this fighting spirits where Belgium has generally problems with. But as for France at the time against Ireland, we had a good records. Don't have a good records against England at the time and against Wales now. But Scotland and Ireland, and I don't know why, we have better results than against the other British teams.
And also the opponents, Netherlands and France, were all big rivals. They still are. The Netherlands for the north of the country and France for the south of the country. They are still regarded as our biggest rivals. But like you said, we had a good record back then. Maybe not against Netherlands because we lost the two previous qualification because of them. We didn't qualify to Germany, if I remember well, and Argentina, yes, because of
and also in the
France,
quarterfinal of the Euro 76, we lost 5-0 in Rotterdam.
It was the last game of Raymond Goethals back then, yes.
And of Christian Pio.
But we were quite confident because we knew we had a good team after the Euro 80. So yeah, despite a strong group, we started with confidence.
The World Cup qualifier started on October 15th, 1980, as Belgium traveled to Dublin to face the Republic of Ireland at Lansdowne Road. Now, for this match, we have the following lineup: Jean-Marc Pfaff of Beveren in goal, Eric Gerrits of Standard Liège, Luc Milkamps of Waregem. He'll be replaced by international debutant Michel de Wolf of RWD Molenbeek in the 88th minute. Walter Muse, Club Brugge, Michel Renquin, Standard Liège. Captain of the team, Wilfried Van Moer of Beveren. He'll be replaced by Joseph Heilingen of Waterschei in the 84th minute. Now, this would be Joseph Heilingen's second and final cap for Belgium. His previous cap before this had been in 1973. So we're talking 7 years gap. Then René van der Eycken of Club Brugge, Ludo Cook of Anderlecht, Albert Clutens of Beveren, Erwin Vandenberg of Liège, and Jan Keulemans of Club Brugge. Now, in this match, though Belgium were the away team, they were generally in control in the beginning of the match and took the lead in the 13th minute. So Erwin Vandenberg sent a cross, and Van Moer's header in the middle sent Clutens through, and he forced Jared Payton to go wide, and he scored from a narrow angle. But just before halftime, Liam Brady from the middle, he sent Tony Grealish through, and again he went around Pfaff and scored, and the match ended as a 1-1 tie, but it was a precious away tie for Belgium.
Yes. And if I remember well, in Ireland, back then at the stadium, the grass was high always. If you remember that, Jean-Marc?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Because
it was a quite strange experience to watch that.
Yeah, and because a few days later, Ireland would play a rugby test match, they didn't want to cut the grass because of rugby.
Yes. So that's was something I remember about the game, watching it on TV, that the grass was
And technically, it was
higher
more
than normal.
difficult. I mean, it was not a bad result. Before the game,
No, no.
they said, well, we are coming for a victory, but if we take 1 point, it's okay. And at the end of the qualification period, this had made the difference. Because if we had lost in Ireland, we wouldn't have gone to Spain, and Ireland would have. So it's an important result because everybody lost in Dublin, France, Netherlands, of course, Cyprus, and we were the only team to take a point away at the time. So, well, it was a difficult game because we were in control of the first period after the goal of Claytons. We could have scored a second one. But at the end, there were some problems in the defense. I remember we tried to play the offside trap as usual. And in some cases, the equalization of Ireland came from a mistake from the defenders. And there were also 2 or 3 other moments where Ireland could have scored, and they could also have a penalty because Faf made a mistake on an Irish player, but there was an offside. And if you look at the picture now, it's not clear that it was really offside. And just to note it, the referee were Luxembourgish referee, which means someone who is not really accustomed to top matches.
Yeah,
so it could have been the difference also.
The next match was against the Dutch neighbors at Brussels at Heysel. Now, this is a Dutch team that, as you mentioned, is not as strong as the team from the 70s, but you still have some of the remnants of that team, like Ruud Krol, the captain of the team, Ernie Brands, a lot of AZ-67 Alkmaar players who would win the Dutch title and in fact would reach the final of the UEFA Cup that season. It's the likes of Jan Peters, John Metgod, Kees Kist, but you also have other remnants like the Van der Kerkhoff twins and of course Simon Tahamata of Standard Liège. So in this match we have the following lineup: Faf, Gerrit, Luke Milkamps, Muse, Renkan, Van Moor, captain of a team, Van der Eycken, Cook, Clutens, Vandenberg, and Kulemans. So the match was settled with a penalty kick in the 48th minute. Rene van der Eycken was fouled in the box by Willy van der Kerkhoff, and Erwin Vandenberg scored from the spot to give Belgium the precious victory. Now, it was a violent and very physical match with many fouls and bookings. It was also reported that Michel Rencan even lost a tooth in this match. He said that he hoped qualification would already be achieved by the following year when they traveled to Rotterdam, as he feared an even worse, more violent reception. This was a very important psychological and confidence boosting victory, as you reminded that the Dutch had eliminated the Belgians for the 1974 and the 1978 World Cups.
Yes, I remember it was a really tight game, and like you said, very physical. Not many chances. Yeah, the penalty settled it. And the Heysel was packed that day, was really full, if I remember well. Like you said, very important win. Very important and big confidence booster.
Yeah, because it was the first victory over in an official match for years against the Netherlands.
Yes, indeed.
Even if it was not a fantastic game, the team proved to be a real team fighting on each ball.
Yes.
And as you say, it was physically terrible. If you see some pictures now, you don't understand why the referee didn't give a few red cards, because both Van der Kerkhoff twins, Van der Eyck and Renkin, they made fouls that now you would certainly be sent off directly. It was a different football, of course, but even for that period, it was too hard, I think. Yeah, and the Dutch didn't try to play. They had a reputation of playing a nice football in the 70s, but this team of the 80s was totally different.
Like you said, totally different. It was not the Dutch team from 74 and even 78. They had a more physical approach. Not many Ajax players, if I remember well.
No,
Ajax was back then, they were not that as good as in the 70s. And lots of AZ Alkmaar players, like you said.
AZ, Feyenoord, which are
Feyenoord, yes, which were more
physical team.
Yes, indeed. At the end of the day, a very important win. 4 points for 2 difficult games. Good start.
Three
Oh, three
points.
points. 3 points. It was 2 points. I apologize. It was still two
Oh,
points
that's
for the
right.
win back then. Yes, yes, yes. Indeed.
The next qualifier and the last match of the calendar year was on December 21st against Cyprus at Nicosia, that Belgium were expected to win. Now, for this match, Michel Rencan and Ludo Cook were injured, and Gerard Plessers and Raymond Moments would deputize for them. So, for this match, we have the following lineup: Faf, Gerrits, Milkamps, Muse, Gerald Plessers of Standard Liège. He'd replaced by Ludo Cook in the 72nd minute. Raymond Moments of Lokeren, Rene van der Eycken, Van Moor, captain of the team, Vandenberg, Clutens. He replaced by Eddie Woodekers of Standard Liège in the 78th minute and Jan Kulemans. Belgium would win this match 2-0. Vandenberg scored in the 30th minute and Jan Kulemans scored in the 68th minute. This is a match that I have not been able to find any video footage. We should also point out that this was Belgium's last match with Adidas kits, as they would soon be using Admiral kits. Of course, they would return to Adidas in late 1983.
I don't have many memories of that game, but it was like you said, we were expecting to win it quite easily. That's what we did, I think. Do you have any memories of that game, Jean-Marc?
Not a lot. I think it was not
No,
broadcasted on television.
no.
We don't find any picture anymore. And I would say that the minimum was done. France
Yes.
had won 7-0 in Cyprus, so we could have expected a little more goals. But often at that period of the time, and we would see it a few years after when we lost to Albania, it was always difficult for Belgian national team to play at the end of the year in December after the European Cups. The players were quite tired and not totally focused on matches away that are not really attracting and playing in Cyprus. If you say that in Ireland the grass was too high, I think in Cyprus there was no grass at the time. It was
Oh,
a
not
kind of
much.
sand or something like that, or the grass was missing, and it was a difficult field. But however, it's not an excuse.
No, no, and like you mentioned, we against the so-called smaller teams, we always had problems. They were not like the 7-0 like France when we didn't do that.
No,
But
and
still
always
important,
difficult
two
to
points.
make the game. Always difficult to develop an offensive game. It's more counter-attack teams and a
Indeed, yeah,
strong, a well-organized team. So when you play against teams like Cyprus, it's always difficult. France, for instance, they had a lot of different playmakers and quick wingers. We don't have that in Belgium
no,
at the
no,
time. Kleutens
no,
was this kind of player, but it was not to compare with Forstu or someone like that, huh?
indeed, all six.
Or six.
Yeah, yeah.
In the new year, Belgium's next qualifier would be against Cyprus. This would be on February 18, 1981 at Brussels at the Heysel. Now, for this match, Wilfried Van Moor was out injured, and Belgium would miss him for this match. And again, this was the first match with Belgium wearing the new Admiral kits that are very memorable that they would wear in the 1982 World Cup. So for this match, we have Faf, Eric Gerrits, captain of a team in Van Moor's absence, Renquin, Clutens, he'd be replaced by Frank Verkouteren of Anderlecht in the 72nd minute. Plessers, he'd be replaced by Woodekers in the 72nd minute. Moments, Van der Eycken, Willy Wellens of Standard Liège, Vandenberg, Cook, and Kulemans. Belgium would take the lead in the 13th minute when, on the left side, Gerard Plessers sent a long cross or a shot, or he was attempting a cross or a shot, and that went in. In the 18th minute, Cluten's cross from the right struck a defender before it reached Vandenberg, and he scored. Just before halftime, there's a free kick on the right side, and the Cypriot Stefanos Lissandrou pulls a goal back for Cyprus. Astonishingly, Cyprus ties the match in the 60th minute when from the middle, Fivos Vrahimis was sent through and he struck from outside of the box as Faf had ventured out. But Belgium would score the winner in the 67th minute when Rene van der Eycken sent a long cross in the box. Vandenberg controlled it and did a combination play with Keulemans, who scored. Belgium won 3-2, but I imagine they would have been criticized after a difficult win against the weakest team in the group. And other than that, do you remember what was the reaction to this new Admiral kit? Was it apparent that it would become a classic for Belgium?
Don't have much recollection about the reaction, but it's a kit I personally loved. I think it was the best ever we had. Yes.
I totally agree with you. It's very nice and very uncommon, and I would say original. But
With these two
could we
stripes, it
expect
was
that
really
it would
beautiful.
be so iconic? I don't know. But Admiral kits in general were very nice and were different from others.
And it was mainly the English teams who had it,
Yeah.
at the time, and in Europe it was not common, not seen for European
No.
continental team, I mean, to wear that. And although my team, RWD Molenbeek, had an Admiral kit at the time. It was a copy of the English kit, but with the black instead of the blue. If you remember that English kit back then.
Yeah.
But
Which was also nice.
yeah, and yes, Admiral was probably that's like I said, my favorite ever Belgian kit. Yes, but for that particular game against Cyprus, we were expecting to win quite easily, and it didn't happen, of course. If I remember well, the reaction was not that good from the press and everything. And also the Eisel was not full. It was only 17,000 people at the time for that game. A very big contrast with the game against the Netherlands. Somehow the public did not sell out the Eisel for, yeah, can't remember the reason, but against these smaller teams, it was
It was
not very.
February and it was Cyprus.
Yes, it was Cyprus. So, but I was at the game personally, and we were quite unpleasantly surprised because Cyprus, they were expecting, of course, to lose heavily, but they did a good game against us, if I remember well.
Yeah, and when we look at the pictures now, we see that the two goals that Belgium conceded, the defense and Praf in particular, were not in a good day because the first one is a ball in the 5 meters from the goal. Praf should have gone. And for the second one, he goes out 20 or 25 meters out. And of course, he didn't catch the ball. And what I remember is that Belgium was aware that the goal difference could be decisive if we were a few teams with the same number of points. And there was a premium promised to players if they won by 3 goals or more. It was something like 15,000 Belgian francs, which is about 350 euro. You can laugh at it now, but at the time it was a quite reasonable premium.
It was big money. Well, it was an important sum.
It was a quite reasonable premium, but they were not able. And at the end, it was a feeling of belief. Oof, it's okay. We have won. We have not lost a point because the team who lost a point against Cyprus will be eliminated. And in fact, I think Cyprus didn't take any points.
Finished with 0 points, Cyprus, at the end of the
well, the problem is that it was 2-2 at 20 minutes from the end. So I don't say it's lucky because it was deserved, but I mean, you never know. And what was frightening is the fact that the defense, which was normally the strong point of Belgium, had taken 2 goals.
I think at the time we underestimated Cyprus. With the team thought probably that it would be an easy win, and they did not play like against the bigger teams in the group. So yeah, like you said, felt a feeling of relief after the game that we were able to take the 2 points.
Can you describe the circumstances leading to Jean-Marie Pfaff's suspension until the end of the season?
It was a strange story. It was a strange story. It was
accused of kicking the referee after the game.
Yeah, it was a Waasland derby between Beveren, where Pfaff plays, and Lokeren in the Cup, quarterfinal of the Belgian Cup. And it was in 2 matches. And after the first leg, it was 2-2 in Beveren. And at the end, they would be eliminated by their rival of Lokeren. And at the end of the game, he was accused of kicking a linesman.
Yes.
And there was no witness. So it was the speech of the linesmen versus the speech of Jean-Marie Pfaff. And the Belgian Federation say it's not acceptable, and he took 5 or 6 months ban. It was not always very clear what happened.
He said nothing happened and that it was done to kick him out of the national team. It was like he said, it was a plot against him. So like I said, no witness. So it was the word of his word against the word of. I think the last one was Tyrion.
Tyrion, yeah, a French-speaking one. So
Yes.
I don't know. We don't know exactly what happened, and nobody will know because it will always be the words of Faf and the words of Tyrion. And well, we don't know.
But Faf, even at that when he was playing in Belgium, and later on, he was still a controversial figure. It was someone who had a
special.
personality which was a bit different from the average player. He was always in the picture. He was very, how could I say,
He wanted to be the main figure of the team.
Exactly, that was why. Yeah, so his personality played against him in that affair, I think.
Well, the next qualifier was on March 25th, 1981 at Heysel against the Republic of Ireland. And of course, Faf is suspended, so it'll be Michel Prudhomme of Standard Liège deputizing for him. And Van Moer is still injured at this point. So for this match, we have the following lineup: Michel Prudhomme of Standard Liège in goal, Gerrits, captain of the team, Milkamps, Muse, Renkan, Moments. He replaced by Verkauteren in the 85th minute. Van der Eycken, Klutens, Vandenberg, Cook. He'd replaced by Willy Wellens of Standard Liège in the 76th minute. And this was for Wellens, this was his seventh and final cap. His first cap had been in 1976. And Keulemans. This would be a match where the Irish would feel like they were robbed. Just before halftime, Liam Brady took a free kick and he found Frank Stapleton, who scored. But in the play, the referee backed into a Belgian player on the ground and fell, and he disallowed the goal. And it was unclear why he had disallowed the goal, and he didn't give a reason. Belgium would score the winner under controversial circumstances as well in the 87th minute. First of all, it was felt that Eric Gerrits had clearly dived to earn a free kick outside of the box. And Rene van der Eycken's free kick, it struck the bar, it went up in the air, and Keulemans climbed over all the players to head in the winner. And Belgium got a very important win against one of the group rivals. After the final whistle, the Irish manager, Owen Hand, he confronted the Portuguese referee, Nazare, later described him as a disgrace and a cheat. Many observers felt a draw would have been a fair result, but in any case, Belgium were now in the driver's seat and they took the leadership of the group. At this point, they had earned 9 out of 10 points with 4 wins and a draw in 5 matches. So they were in a very good position. In a way, did this win essentially clinch the group for Belgium?
No, because we still had difficult games to come against France twice and in the Netherlands. So, but I remember the game was played in the pouring rain. The rain was really hard. If I have a good memory of that, and very difficult game against a very good team of Ireland. But it was also a feeling of relief after the game that we had won in the final minutes, and yeah, the belief was strong that we could go on and qualify that after that victory.
As you say, the field was also more and more difficult because of the heavy rain.
Yes.
And well, there was, of course, this controversial goal disallowed for Ireland. But Prudhomme did make also a number of important saves on this game. Without him, Ireland could have opened the score and it would have been different. And yeah, I mean, there were a lot of opportunities for everybody. It was a good game compared with the Cyprus game. And well, maybe Belgium was a little lucky at the end, but it was, you could say it's deserved because they had more opportunities than Ireland, but Ireland has a few good opportunities.
There were a lot of Irish fans in my memory, if I remember. That
always
traveled to the game.
Huh?
Yeah, but still at the time, traveling was not like
So
today.
easy.
And they still had a great following. And like you said, Prudhomme did a played a very good game. And on a side note, we talked about Faf in the for the previous game. He, of course, went on to play for Bayern Munich. So he never played well, he came back to Belgium afterwards, but back to the Irish game, yes, it was a very confidence-boosting victory.
Yeah, difficult. But as we say before, Ireland had a very good team, and if they were in another group, probably they would have qualified.
Yes. They were probably the most difficult opponent of the three rivals, although we lost in Rotterdam and Paris afterwards, but we'll discuss about that later, I guess.
At home, at least, they were the one who could have drawn in Brussels. That we will speak about France, but I mean, it's a strong team that we beat, and I mean, we didn't realize that at the time, but now, with a few years after, we can say it was a turning point of the campaign, I would say.
It was probably the best ever Irish team, although they qualified later for World Cups and Euros. But that team in early 80s, like you said, if you look at the lineup, it's probably one of their strongest ever teams that they had. So for 3 points in 2 games against them was quite a good turnout. Yeah.
The next qualifier and the last for the season was on April 29th against France at Paris at Parc des Princes. For France, they were missing Michel Platini and Jean-François Larios. So these were key losses for the home side. Of course, for Belgium, Faf is still suspended, though Van Moor is back, but he was somewhat far from match fit, though he captained Belgium again for this match. For this match, we have the following lineup: Michel Prudhomme in goal, Garrett, Milkamp, he'd be replaced by De Wolf in the 17th minute, Muse, Renkin, Verkauteren, he'd be replaced by René Verheyen of Lokeren in the 65th minute, Van der Eycken, Van Moor, captain of the team, Cluitens, Vandenberg, and Keulemans. For France, you have some familiar faces: Marius Trésor in defense, Maxime Bossis, Jean Tigana, Alain Giresse, Dominique Rocheteau, and Didier Six. Belgium would take the lead in the 5th minute when Verkatren's long cross from the left was volleyed in by Vandenberg. It would be very similar to the one he scored against Argentina in 1982. France would tie the match in the 14th minute. Bernard Gengini's free kick struck the crossbar and Gérard Soler headed in the rebound. France would take the lead in the 26th minute when Tigana passed to Rocheteau in the right wing, who crossed for Didier Six to tap home. 5 minutes later, France scored a third goal when Tigana sent Soler through, who shot from a narrow angle. It struck Prudhomme before going in. So France were winning 3-1. Early in the second half, Belgium pulls a goal back in the 52nd minute. Van Moor lobbed the ball in the box for Keulemans, who trapped and headed up and shot past Dominique Dropsy. There were some appeals for offside, but the goal stood. And in the end, France won 3-2. Wilfred Van Moor's poor form was called into question as Belgium lost for the first time in these qualifiers. However, Thies defended Van Moor against the critics and emphasized his importance. It was the first loss, and maybe some felt the difficult task had already been done.
Yes, but at the time I remember it was quite deception to lose that game. If I remember, we were expecting not to lose it, maybe not win it, but the reaction after defeat was mixed, I think. It was not an unexpected result. And France were one of, like I mentioned before, one of our biggest rivals. And it was not a nice feeling after the game, in my recollection. Yeah. Although it was a very good team of France, of course, even without Platini.
I think at the time, Michel Hidalgo, who was the French manager, realized that he could play without Platini or with what they call afterward the magical...
Carré Magique, yeah.
Carré Magique, yes. He discovered Gengini as number 10. He had Giresse, he had Tigana. And what I remember is that we took 3 goals in less than 20 minutes. Yeah, and it was really a poor performance from the defense, and especially of Michel Prudhomme. The third goal by Soler is a terrible mistake by Prudhomme. And even the first one, the crossbar the shot of Gentini who hit the crossbar, he didn't react quite quickly on the header of Soler. And it was typical of Prudhomme at that time. One good game in the national team, and afterward,
One bad game.
one bad, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had to wait until the 90s to establish himself as a great goalkeeper in Belgium. For instance, he was there in the qualification and he would not go to Spain. To Spain, it would be Custers, Pfaff,
And Munaron,
and Munaron.
Yes.
So it means that Prudhomme was a little irregular. He made a fantastic match against Ireland and a very poor performance in Paris. Was it deserved? Was it not deserved? There are a lot of opportunities for both teams. French was quite offensive. They were quite strong. They didn't have a good defense either. We could have drawn. We could have lost by more than one goal. But the problem is that this rivalry, and which means that the next game against them, the return match in Hazel, would be decisive for both teams.
But like you mentioned, you talked about our goalkeeper problem at the time, but France had also a problem. There was not, would I say,
An established
someone who was
goalkeeper,
an established goalkeeper. They were switching between Dropsy, who played that game, Ettori, who would be the main keeper of the World Cup. There was Baratelli also.
And
they also had a problem back then, the goalkeeper. And back to Prudhomme, he was still young at the time. He was only playing for Cup.
Yeah, he was
3 or 4 years for
21, 22, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, he started famously at the game at Anderlecht with Standard as a 70 years old, I think. And then he became quite a big prospect. And that's how he came to the national team. But yeah, he didn't even make it for the World Cup. And it was maybe that game who sealed that his absence for the World Cup.
He had to go to Mechelen to establish himself as a very, very good goalkeeper. In Standard, he was playing once, and once it was Baudard, and it was not always clear who would be the number one in Standard.
Yeah.
And then when you speak to the French keeper, for the next game, they would select a keeper which will only play once also. It's Pierrick Iard, who played for Rennes and Bastia.
Yes.
And it was his only games in Hazel, but we'll speak afterwards.
Yes.
He was not fantastic at all, I think, in Hazel.
No, they had a bigger problem than us, I think, for the on the goalkeeping.
But on this game, I think if you had a decent keeper, probably you draw.
Yes. If Pfaff had a good game, because Pfaff, he was also sometimes...
remember Cyprus.
Yes.
So this match, the return leg against France, is in the new season 1981-82. So on September 9th, Belgium hosted France at Heysel. Now, as you mentioned, France had a debutant as a goalkeeper in his only match for France, Pierrick Iard of Bastia. You also have another debutant in defense, Philippe Mahut of Metz. France were missing Tigana and Rocheteau. Michel Platini was deployed in a more forward position for this match. As far as Belgium, Jean-Marc Pfaff was back as his suspension has ended, but Belgium were missing Eric Gerrits in defense, so it would be Marc Baek who would deputize for him. For this match, we have the following lineup. Jean-Marc Pfaff, Michel Rencan, who at this point had joined Anderlecht in his only season with the club, Milkamps, Muse, Marc Baek of Beveren, Verkatran, making his international debut, Alex Juniatinski of Antwerp, Van Moor, captain of the team. He replaced by Luke's brother, Mark Milkamps of Waregem in the 51st minute. Vandenberg, Cook, and Keulemans. In this match, Thies had placed Keulemans in a more withdrawn position to act as a constant pressure on the defense, and this seemed to confuse the French defense as they seemed ill at ease with Belgium's tactics. Now, Belgium would take the lead in the 24th minute when Verkausen crossed from the left and the debutant Jurnatinski tapped it in from close range. Belgium would have to wait until near the end in the 83rd minute to score the second goal, where Jurnatinski's cross from the left found Van Moor at the edge of the box, and he laid it on for Vandenberg to score from outside of the box. Belgium won, and they earned their first World Cup qualification since 1970. And in winning, they became the first European nation to qualify for this World Cup. So let's discuss the match and any memories about how you celebrated.
Oh, it was my memory one of the best ever game I went to for with Belgium, and it was quite euphoric. And Belgium had a great game that day. Like you mentioned, the Davidson Chernyatinski. It was quite innovative from Tace at the time to select him because he was quite a conservative manager, but he gave Chernyatinski a chance and he took it with that goal. If I remember well, it was maybe 1 centimeter before the line we had at the time. It was the easiest goal ever. Everybody could have scored it, but he was there at the right place to score. And yeah, said Belgium were really good that day in my memory. It was one of the best ever game for Belgium at the time. And celebrations were, yeah, it was a great memory.
Yeah, absolutely the same feeling. For me, it's the best match of the 80s and of the 90s.
Yes.
Certainly of Belgium. Maybe better. You had maybe to wait until Brazil 2018 to play like this with a different team and a different level, I would say. But we outplayed France, which was a good team. There was just a sink after 5 or 10 minutes. Platini scored a goal, which was disallowed for offside, which was probably and certainly not offside. But it was the only chance of France. The rest of the game was totally for Belgium. As you say, very strong technically. But when you see the second goal of Vandenberg, it's Meus who took the ball in defense, gave the ball to the winger, and he's still there to give the ball to the volley of Vandenberg, who goes in the goal. It's a fantastic goal and a fantastic game. And I mean, France had really no chance. When you look now at the French sites and when they speak about this match, they say we didn't play in Hazel, we didn't compete against Belgium, but it was not because France was poor, it was because Belgium was very, very good, I would say.
And we only scored in the final minutes the second goal, but it should have been sealed before that. And
absolutely.
The atmosphere was one of the best I experienced at the Hazel.
Because everybody knew
atmosphere was great. Yeah.
I think Netherlands had played a few minutes before, or the match was finished a few minutes before against Ireland, and everybody knew that if Belgium won, they were in Spain. So it was absolutely fantastic. One of them, and with the old Hazel, I mean, there were much more crowd, and really you hear the supporters at the time. So, it was a fantastic night, one of the most fantastic night of the Belgian football team, I would say.
Yes, indeed. At the old Hazel packed, and that was the game where I talked earlier about it. There were too many people inside. It was not that safe, I would say. But yeah, that's the memory. It's one of the best ever.
After this match against France, Wilfred Van Moor stated that he was retiring from the Belgium national team now that they had qualified. Why do you think he made this initial decision at the time?
He was already 36, something like that. He was a little tired, and he has been transferred after the Euro from Birmingham to Beveren. And in Beveren, they play a European Cup, so he had more games to play than in Birmingham. A little more pressure because Birmingham was second half
of
the was not such a good team. He was not so good as he used to be in the Euro 80 campaign. And also there was a lot of pressure from the press to get Juan Lozano in the teams. Lozano was the playmaker of Anderlecht. He was born in Antwerp, but he was from Spanish. Well, the Belgian Federation tried to naturalize him, to say, well, he must go with us in Spain. And in the opinion, it was to replace Van Moor. So maybe Van Moor felt it and say, okay, I won't go. And finally, he will go. And what is also interesting is the fact that Lozano would never play for Belgium because the Senate refused to give his naturalization. And the president, the chairman of the Senate was the chairman of Liers, Mr. Van der Poorten. Herman Van der Poorten, he was the chairman of Liers, which is a rival team in the Belgian first division, and he say, no, he is a foreigner, he will stay a foreigner. And if you look at the Panini
Panini,
figure,
I was about to say that, yes.
yeah, look
He's
at
in it.
Panini for
Here is,
82
he's in
World
it,
Cup.
yes.
Lozano is with the Admiral kit in the Belgium team, and he never played a single match for Belgium.
He's in the Panini album, yes. Quite funnily, yeah. And yes, it was a big campaign to get him naturalized, and like you said, never succeeded. So incidentally, the Liers Stadium is named after Van der Poorten.
Yeah.
So
The
the
man
stadium
who refused
bears his
Lozano.
name. Yes. Yeah, but Van Mo still went to Spain. Yeah. He
Yeah.
came back to his decision.
So, unexpectedly, this last qualifier against the Dutch was a dead rubber for Belgium. So, how was the general interest for this match, bearing in mind that after all it was against the Dutch?
I think it was a relief that it was not an important game because, of course, it was one of the most difficult game for us, and it was treated like a friendly, I think, from the Belgian part of. But of course, the Dutch, they still had to win to have a chance to qualify, which they would lose a qualification later on in Paris. But so they were quite motivated. They had to win. But for Belgium, it was, if I remember well, treated like a friendly game.
Yeah, and there were a lot of pressure on the Dutch team, which were very disappointing in this campaign. But against Belgium, they played their best match of
Yeah,
the
we lost three. It was 3-0, I think. Yes.
3-0, and I mean, Belgium didn't exist, so it would have been different if it was decisive, but
Luckily, it was not.
it would have been difficult because for once the Netherlands played a good match.
Yeah, to qualification later on. Yeah.
And for this important match for the Dutch, they actually recalled Johan Niskens from New York Cosmos. And surprisingly, the Dutch manager Kees Rivers, he did not call up any Belgian-based players such as Tahamata or Dusbaba or even Ari Han. Now, for the Dutch, you still have the likes of Ruud Krol, John Metgard, Ipswich duo of Frans Thijssen and Arnold Muren, also Johnny Rep playing in Saint Etienne in France. Like you said, Belgium did not treat this as an important match and they rested some of the players. In fact, Cook, Vandenberg, and Koulemans were rested for this match. For this match, we have the following lineup: Faf, Garrett, captain of the team, now that Van Moor had seemingly retired, Luc Milkamps, Muse, and I should mention that Walter Muse also that season he had joined Standard Liège from Club Brugge. Renquin, Verkauteren, Van der Eycken, who had joined Italian side Genoa, Mark Milkamps, making his international debut and playing in his only match for Belgium, Edward Snelders of Lokeren. He'd replaced by Plessers in the 62nd minute, Renatinsky, Woerdekers, and he'd replaced by Clutens in the 46th minute. Now, Clutens was playing for Anderlecht that season. And this would be his 12th and final cap for Belgium. His first cap had been in 1977. This match, there's always the rivalry against the Dutch, and Walter Muse would be sent off in this match in the 39th minute. He was already booked in the 19th minute, but he was sent off in the 39th minute after a foul on Metgard. So Rene van der Eycken had to move to cover his position. So this match, the Dutch won 3-0. They opened the scoring in the 5th minute when on the right side, Niskens sent a long cross. It was headed across to the right by Van Kooten and volleyed by Metgard from the edge of the box. The Dutch would double the lead in the 26th minute when from the middle, Niskens sent Van Kooten through on the right and he shot past Faf. And they would score the third in the 54th minute when Muren's cross from the right was struck in by Ruud Gills. And the Dutch won 3-0. Obviously, the match cannot be judged adequately as, like I said, it was a inconsequential for Belgium. But in a broader picture, Belgium had qualified for their first World Cup since 1970. Was this a reflection of the progress shown since the 1980 Euros?
I think yes, because at the end of the day, we had a very good campaign despite two losses. But maybe the strongest Belgian team that we had. I think 82 World Cup, we maybe had a better team than in 86, despite being eliminated at an earlier stage. But yes, it was a good time for the Belgian national team, yes.
Yeah, and it was only the sixth time that Belgium qualified for a World Cup. So it means we were not accustomed so much to going to the World Cup. We were part of the first three in the 30s, but there was no elimination, or almost no elimination. Everybody could could join. And when it came to qualification, then it was difficult for Belgium. We qualified only in 70 and in 82.
And in 54, I think.
54, but it was
Switzerland.
Switzerland, but it was a very small group, I think, so it was not so difficult to
At the
qualify.
time, it was
Yeah.
not that difficult.
So, I mean, it was a progress. And the fact that more and more teams would qualify is also an advantage, of course, for countries like Belgium, which are still small countries, and you have 10 million inhabitants, now 11. It's not so easy to qualify. If you look at Portugal, for instance, they also missed a few World Cups in that period. Denmark, the same thing. Don't speak about Greece, which have the same population. So for small countries like that, I mean, even the Netherlands the year after would miss a lot of World Cup. So it's not so easy for small countries. If you are not Spain, Italy, or Germany, or England, it's always difficult to qualify.
And there were not many. Well, they increased the number of teams to 24, but still, it was difficult to qualify back then. Not like today, where everybody can go to the World Cup. But also, Belgium at the time had a really good record in the European competitions, or the club competitions, I mean. So with Anderlecht doing really well, like Mechelen a little bit later, Standard did really well also in that period, and
Bruges,
most of the Bruges, even Molenbeek. And back then, there were not many players playing for foreign teams. Most of the players were playing for Belgian teams. It was a strong. We were quite a good footballing country at the time. Yeah.
Now, was there belief that Belgium could be a surprise like in 1980, or were expectations more grounded as that's
No,
the Belgian mentality?
no. I think we went to Spain with confidence that we could do something. The elimination against Poland was like it was not really good received. It was the feeling was that we could go could be one of the outsiders for that World Cup. We went to Spain with high expectations, if I remember well.
Yeah, the problem of Belgium is that they had never qualified for the second round or for the quarterfinals in previous editions. It was the first time we go to the second round.
Yes.
And the fact we play Poland and USSR, which was not the good USSR of 86, we could have expected a little more, but we missed totally the game against Poland.
Yes, against Poland was a catastrophe. I mean, with famously Theo Kusters playing in goal after the collision between Faf and Gerrits in the Hungary game. And Kusters was put into goal, and he had a disastrous game. And Boniek scored a hat-trick, if I remember well.
Well, this was the start of 6 consecutive World Cup qualifications. Was there a belief at the time that this generation would go far if the backbone was maintained for the years to come?
I think so, yes. Despite after the 82 World Cup, there was that big corruption scandal between Standard and Waterskei, which meant that a lot of players had long suspensions. But before that, the optimism was high for Belgian football, yes.
But 6 editions in a row, I wouldn't have bet on it because it's a long time. It's 20 years, almost 20 years. So it's difficult to say that you will be performing during 20 years. We were expecting to go to Mexico, certainly, probably also to Italy, and we missed it. No, we didn't miss it. We were very unlucky not to go further also in Italy. But we had the problems with the Euro qualification, but not with the World Cup qualification. But I mean, as we establish ourselves as a better team, we were better in the European rankings. So we had teams which were less impressive and not so strong as France or as Netherlands. Huh?
But like you said, we missed a lot of Euros. It was quite strange at the
Quick,
time
yeah.
that we went through the qualifications for the World Cup every time, and the Euro not. It was it's a bit strange.
And even if the number of teams in Euro were also increased in '96, we still miss it. Huh?
Yes. Euro 2000 was the first, of course, like we are organizing it. But after that, we never went to the Euros.
In closing, was this one of the most impressive World Cup qualifications ever for Belgium, given the quality of their opponents in the group, in fact?
Yes, that was, in reflection, maybe the most impressive qualification campaign, despite 2 losses. Yeah, it was against our big rivals, finishing top of the group. Still be a great memory for us.
Yeah, I do agree. If we are now in the same group with Ireland, France, and Netherlands, I'm not sure that we would qualify,
I don't
even if
think
we
we
have a
would.
good team.
No.
And one has to note that it was the last time we beat France in an official game. It's 45 years ago.
Indeed,
And
yeah.
since that, we haven't won against France in an official friendly. It's something else. So it's very impressive performance. I would say the 70 campaign was also very good. It was we qualified having Spain and Yugoslavia in the group. Yugoslavia was strong. They played a 68 Euro final against Italy. But the names of France and Netherlands for a Belgium supporter qualifying against France and Netherlands, it's something fantastic.
Yes, indeed.
As Stéphane say, if we are French speaking, we don't like the French team, and if you are Dutch speaking, you don't like the Dutch team. So
Yeah, it was the biggest rivals, and we finished top
you
of them.
cannot imagine a better scenario, I would say.
And like you said today, I'm not sure it would. It could happen again.
It would be difficult at least.
Well, with that, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this interview, and all our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, thanks to both of you again, and hope to continue these discussions on the Belgian football history.
Thank you to you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
inviting us.
Thank you.